I want to tell you about how losing my grandfather, who was the most influential person in my life, led me to design a social experiment with the intention of having others replicate it. The aim was to bring him back and learn all the valuable lessons he could have taught me if he were still alive. Not a day passed when my grandfather wasn't badly beaten or bullied solely because of his religion. Despite seemingly endless obstacles, he prevailed, he helped others, and even helped those who didn't see eye to eye with him. When my father was no longer with us, my grandfather stepped up to the plate, picked up the pieces, and provided for my family just as a father would. He deeply understood what it meant not to have a father in his life. Over time, my grandfather anchored my moral compass. He provided me with words of wisdom, and his actions, grounded in humility, always demonstrated empathy and integrity. Only after his passing did I realize that the very seeds that gave root to his exemplary character were the obstacles he overcame and the lessons he learned from them. My grandfather was born in Iran and grew up in the marginalized Jewish ghetto of Isfahan. His childhood neighborhood was segregated by the city's sewer system, transporting the city's muck and disease that was dug in the middle of the street. Its stench stood beside the pervasive fragrance of Mohammadi roses, native to Iran, meandering through the narrow alleyways. When it rained, the dhimmi Jew, who's a Jew of minority status, was on one side of the trench, the Gentile at an arm's length on the other, for fear that the rainwater would splash from the Judah Najest, a dirty Jew, and make the Gentile impure. He had an arduous upbringing. My grandfather was a pleasant surprise and the youngest of 10 children when his mother gave birth to him at 54. When he was 7, 2 of his brothers tragically died. Parched, without water in the desert, they resorted to drinking their car's antifreeze. After hearing this, his father immediately attempted suicide, succumbing to his injuries weeks later. My grandfather was left without a role model and bore the responsibility of helping his ailing mother through her old age, while also meeting their family's financial expectations. They were desperate, and so he sold matches and combs on the sidewalk in front of his other brother's store, or hitchhiked for days with truck drivers to buy bundles of dried fruits and nuts that he would resell to vendors. One early morning, when transporting these goods with an unknown driver, he awoke in the back of a pickup truck from the weight of the cold snow pressing on his back. He realized that the makeshift tent over his head had collapsed. In spite of these hardships, he persevered to help provide for his family. He was resilient. When he was 15, he moved to Tehran, the capital, to seek professional prospects. Over time, he established a very successful business. He named his store Khayyam's Consignments. It was his homage to the celebrated Persian mystical poet Omar Khayyam, whose last name means tent builder in Arabic. However, Khayyam's Consignments was not actually a consignment shop. It was named that because he believed that humans are the temporary custodians of their material possessions. And the one thing that belongs to a person and will always remain in this world is one's good name. And for my grandfather, Shalemu, whose name means a man of peace in Judeo-Persian, this definition holds true. His shop was like the Prophet Abraham's tent in the desert, which was intentionally open on all 4 sides to welcome those who were thirsty and all who passed by. My grandfather's store served a purpose greater than business. It was where people could walk in or call him to ask for help or advice. For my grandfather, it was more important to build community. One day, a customer came into his store and told him a 15-year-old boy from a poor village had lost his parents in an earthquake and needed a job. This boy's name was Isa. Almost blindly and without asking my grandmother, he told this man that he would not only give Isa a job, but Isa could live with his family. While others may not have taken the responsibility of providing for a stranger, my grandfather saw his younger self in this boy. Isa soon became my grandparents' 5th child, and his needs were met even before their own children. When Isa married his wife, my grandfather paid for his wedding, gave him a dowry, and helped him buy a home. What's interesting about the social dynamics of this story is my grandfather was Jewish and Isa Muslim. Despite experiencing antisemitism firsthand, my grandfather took the words of the Jewish Bible, "Love others as yourself," literally. He taught me that Muslims and Jews are cousins and should respect one another. He was a peacemaker, a bridge builder, and a tent maker. One night, a thief came into my grandparents' home and stole a valuable Persian rug. The next day, my grandfather learned that the thief was arrested. Without hesitation, my grandfather approached the police commissioner and paid for the thief's bail. After his release, my grandfather invited him to an elaborate cello kebab lunch to better understand why he stole from him. My grandfather quickly learned that the thief was desperate and had no means to provide for his family. So he told him that he would give him money to buy produce and sell it on the busy sidewalk in front of his store. Over time, the former thief opened multiple produce stands and became one of the largest wholesale produce vendors in Tehran. My grandfather recognized that this man needed a chance, much like the opportunity afforded to him by his brother to sell matches in front of his store. Like my grandfather, I have faced the trials and tribulations we encounter within our own life's path that leaves us with bittersweet lessons. My grandfather found solutions for everyone's problems. And whether he knew it or not, he was a master tent builder. He put great care into the tent he built for me, as he did for others. While my grandfather was strong enough to support his family through the literal collapse of his tent, after his loss, I was unsure where to find the strength to rebuild my tent without him. Now where do I go? Who do I go to? Who replaces him? Can I recreate him? There's an African proverb that says, "It takes a village to raise a child." Although my grandfather was pivotal in teaching me impactful lessons through his life experiences, I recognize that my friends, family, and community are now that village. According to the Book of Psalms, the measure of one's quality of life is 70 years. After my grandfather's passing in 2019, I began to reflect on my life's purpose and the value I place on role models. As a villager, I too have a responsibility toward my village that is greater than myself. And in order to be introspective while being a better family member, friend, and community member, I inevitably have to be vulnerable and look at myself from the outside by exploring my valuable relationships. In my quest for answers before I reached this figurative endpoint, I devised a qualitative social experiment with the aim to live purposefully by gaining wisdom for my village rather than learning through hardship firsthand. At the halfway point to my 70th birthday and 6 months until my 35th birthday, I created an experiment called my midlife half birthday and established a new day of reflection for others to replicate. I invited 50 guests and provided them with a link to an anonymous questionnaire with 36 free response questions. The questions delved into the different facets of my life which required growth with the hope of receiving constructive answers from people who represent the different phases of my personal development. This included ex-boyfriends, old colleagues, and childhood classmates. Here are some examples from my questionnaire. Do I honor my word and follow through with my commitments? Do I do the things I say I admire in others? Do I live by my values consistently? I concluded by asking, what did you learn from answering these questions? 72% of the respondents said in their own words that they should reflect on these questions for themselves. Guests joined me at an indoor public atrium wearing white attire, symbolic of a clean start and renewal. They were asked to bring a care package for a homeless person. Upon arrival, guests were approached by a volunteer from the Gift of Life organization who offered them the opportunity to have their cheeks swabbed to check if they are a potential bone marrow or stem cell match for a terminally ill patient. But that's not all. Seating was arranged in rows aligned in a semicircle in order to prepare for the next segment of the evening. I faced my guests and asked them the same questions as my anonymous questionnaire. So this is what happened. What unfolded that evening was an unprecedented series of events, people who had never met, and were from my various social circles shed off their protective layers and became vulnerable while casting light on their lives. Questions were asked, ideas were exchanged, and new friendships were formed. By opening up, they showed me that regardless of their religious, ethnic, gender, age, or social disparities, we have the same internal struggles. This brought strangers who shared dissimilar values closer, inevitably building community. When addressing a question raised about our multifaceted identities in relation to the differences in our life's journey, one guest shared, "If I were in your shoes, I would make the same mistakes you did. I believe any prejudice or hatred in this world is caused by a simple misunderstanding. Whenever I feel prejudice or hatred towards someone else, I know it's because I haven't fully understood." Everyone socialized and noshed on individually wrapped pastries and were also encouraged to add them to the homeless care package they brought to the venue. What they didn't know was that they were going to take their care package back with them so that they could give it to a homeless person who sought refuge in the public atrium or out on the street. This way, they too, like my grandfather, would have an opportunity in helping others. I went in seeking to resurrect my grandfather, but instead I was able to see the fruits of my grandfather's life mission: to build community by focusing on what is human in all of us and without prejudice. Although I engineered my community with intention, unlike he did, I'm applying his mission through an innovative outlook. I want to show you how one person's small acts of kindness can leave a ripple effect that could change other people's lives, and by extension, improve our global community. As a group, we became our own peacemakers, bridge builders, and tent makers. I want to encourage you to take my event as a template and design your own version of my midlife half-birthday. With everything said, I learned that the key to internalizing life lessons is humility. And one thing that can block our potential to achieve our life's purpose is arrogance. So what advice would my grandfather give me now that he's gone? I can imagine him telling me the quote from the Ethics of the Fathers that says, "Who is wise? The one who learns from every person. Who is rich? The one who is happy with their lot. Who is honored? The one who honors his fellows." I learned to care for others from my grandfather, especially those who live on the outskirts of society, or those we might deem to be enemies. The results of my social experiment clearly demonstrates that people want to see through the illusions that divide us across superficial borders. My grandfather was my teacher, yet I tested myself at my midlife half-birthday. I hope that some of you will share my ideas and create a similar experiment in your corner of the world to test your values, increase love in your community, and grow.